Hello. Today is May 4th, and my name is Roz Dimon, and I will be interviewing Carter Hodgkin today as part of the Techspressionism interview series. A little about myself. I've been almost accidentally in digital media since my paintings filled with pixels in the early 80s. And it's been an exciting ride. And I've continued to work in this medium that I feel is the one that defines our time, unlike any other. And enough about me at this point, though. I am going to just read a few words about Carter before she and I engage in a casual conversation where we will talk about her work and her life a little bit. Carter Hodgkin fuses art, science, and technology to explore a new language of abstraction in creating animations, paintings, and large-scale mosaics. Her working process is an interplay between digital means woven into traditional media with an emphasis on the hand. She utilizes a wide range of media from animation and programming to print, paint, and mosaic. Her work has been shown in the US, Europe, and Asia. Awards include the Pollock Krasner Foundation, the Gottlieb Foundation, and New York Foundation for the Arts. Americans for the Arts cited her permanent art public project, Electromagnetic Fall, as one of the best public art projects for 2010. Articles and reviews have appeared in Artforum, Art in America, the New Yorker, and Art.Science Now. She has recently completed mosaics for the Mayo Clinic, Capital One, and Neiman Marcus. She lives and works in New York. Wow, that's impressive. Welcome, Carter. Hi.
Hi.
Good to be with you this afternoon.
Yeah, same here.
Carter, just to begin, for our fellow viewers, can you just tell us a little about your background, where you were born, where you live and maybe practice, and your, basic cultural influences?
Right. Well, I'm from Virginia and grew up west of Washington, and I've been living in New York since 1980. I went to VC. Well, I was in the first class of women at the University of Virginia, and took all the art classes and art history they had there, they had a pretty good art history department. But that's when I decided, you know what, I really do want to be an artist. And I ended up at Virginia Commonwealth, VCU in Richmond, and got a painting and printmaking BFA there. After that, I went to San Francisco for 4 years. Part of my family lived out there, and I just really wasn't ready to go to New York at the time, and I'm really glad I went out there. So one thing I could say about influences is that when I was at VCU, I took some anthropology courses with Colin Turnbull, who was an amazing teacher and anthropologist, and it completely opened my mind to the other ways of being in different cultures. And it's something I've kept as an interest for the rest of my life, I will. And, I've constantly looked at art from other cultures, and being in San Francisco was a boon to that because of the San Francisco Asian Art Museum and just the incredible mix of people from all over, especially Asia, that live in San Francisco. So that was a big influence, along with the tech world that started developing while I was out there.
I love what you just said. I'm just going to interrupt a minute here. Listening to you, as part of Techspressionism, which we're both part of, I love how it's not, we talk about technique, and technology, but we talk about the larger scope of things and the fact that that borders are being crossed, and
Absolutely.
That's what you just spoke about, which I love. Like it's not just as you say, the machine, and even though that's very important too, but
Mhm.
that whole idea of that anthropologist and your vision affecting your world vision.
Yeah, it really has. That's why I encouraged my students to take anthropology at school.
I love that. That's great. I love hearing about that. When did you want us to talk about more influences or any?
Well, I mean, in terms of art that I look at, oh, I see a question about when I became an artist. So
Yeah, sure.
it was through being a Beatle maniac, I have to say.
You're so
I just
refreshing.
loved the Beatles, and whatever, I know I was 12 or 13, and I just started painting their pictures and making some ceramic ashtrays. One of Ringo, I remember. I wish I still had it. And embroidering sweatshirts with their names. It just, I don't know what happened, but anyhow, that's how I got started. And I've always loved painting, and my grandmother gave me a set of paints. Oh, another anecdote was that in my family, if you got your tonsils out, you got a paint by number set.
How wonderful.
I
And
know.
that's what people think we're doing now with digital, right? You just slap
Right.
it down and put on the effect. I mean, my God, if you can't draw and paint outside of digital, you're gonna have a hard time inside.
Right.
But oh,
Right.
that's great. So did you get your paint by number set?
No, because I didn't get my tonsils taken out.
Oh dear. Oh,
But anyway, I've made up for it. And I just, I really do love to paint. And when I have taken sculpture classes, I couldn't do it. I'm not a sculptor. Um,
is your interest more in 2D, the 2D space?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we could talk about your process a little bit, but if you're comfortable, maybe it's always fun just to look at your work while we, talk about these things. So if you're comfortable, why don't we go ahead and just share your screen?
Okay.
Because I was going to ask you a little about your process, and when you said you didn't, sculpture wasn't your thing.
Now,
And
can you?
yet you dive in. It seems to me, looking at some of your work a little bit. I'm learning all the time as I get to know you better, even though our lives have crossed a lot in New York without
That is so
us
true.
meeting, which is amazing. But
Unbelievable.
isn't it? It really is. But there does seem to be, even though they're 2D, they seem to encapsulate a huge mysterious space, which I think is part of the allure of the digital. So maybe you'd like to talk more about that and your process.
Well, I've been doing this homepage I have, the top image is my painting work, which has been influenced by my mosaic work, which is at the bottom left. And then I also have expanded into animation. My process is using, well, I was influenced by, as we were talking about, Sol LeWitt and the idea of iteration and process and other procedural drawing, things like that. So in 2004, I had broken my leg and I was sitting around trying to think of what I was doing next. And I found processing, the program Processing by Casey Reese and Ben Fryer, I believe is their names, that was on the MIT website, and started playing around with that. And what I like about it is not only is it procedural, but well, I gravitated to atomic particle collisions. And now I have to backtrack and say that an old friend of mine is a physicist. And when I was living in California, he was out there too at Stanford doing experiments. And I went to visit and he showed me bubble chamber photographs, and they just really intrigued me for their random form and quirkiness. And that stayed with me. And I've used I used to silk screen images from bubble chamber collisions
So
and
do you mind telling me a little, a bubble chamber collision? Can you talk a little more about that? Like what is that?
uh, well, I'm not a physicist, so I can't get into particle physics, but it's about splitting atoms and where all they capture and measure where all the particles have gone, so they can
Thank
try
you.
to
That does
define.
help, though. That does help. I figured we were in that sphere
Yeah,
somewhat, but yeah,
yeah. So
thanks.
they're traces, actually, you know, there's a collision and they're traces of where the particles have gone. So what I'm able to do with processing is work and attribute behaviors to different particles. I work with 4 different types of particles and attribute like how much gravity or speed, or I can do stuff with colors. And I set off a collision and it always gives a random result. So instead of having to rely on somebody else's, you know, photograph somewhere that I've found, I can do this myself and get different kinds of collisions going and play around with those. So like this mosaic here that I just finished, the collision is in the middle right here. That's where it starts, and then all the particles go outward from that.
Now, this is an installation, right, that you've done?
Well, I just finished it. It was a commission at the Mayo Clinic.
So what's the size of this, just so we get a,
This is 8.5 feet tall by almost 17 feet wide.
and is this done using this processing technique that the
Yeah.
software?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so here's one from Capital One. That one's really big. It's like 11 or more, almost 12 feet high. And then
Beautiful.
45 feet wide. They're hard to photograph, but you can see when I do the close-ups, you can get these tiles are just so gorgeous. I love getting tiles.
Is it partly the pixelated effect at all, or is that too
Oh
simple?
yeah, well see,
I mean, I love that.
each tile represents a pixel in the image.
Sure, it's wonderful.
So, and then the first one I did was at Queens College, which is harder to see because it's 3 different floors and 9 columns. So these are the columns that go down the hallway.
And can we still see that there? Is that a
Oh, it's permanent.
fantastic?
These are all permanent until
That's
the
a
building
great thing.
get trashed. Whatever.
Kudos to you. That's a really important thing to have permanent installations.
Yeah.
May I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
You come from, you always love painting, design, and yet I hear you talking about, sort of, I guess, chaos and randomness. And where did that, when you were doing design, I mean, there's a beauty and a form to your pieces, to me, one that has some kind of synthesis. Where did the randomness in the design part, when did it switch over and you go, oh, I want to feed into this processing thing? It's a different kind of process than just making a design on your canvas
Right.
I don't know if I'm making.
Well, I meant in terms of randomness, it's in the collision. It's in making the collision. It's in starting it and making it. It's because these particles react to each other. Every collision is different.
And I love that. That seems to be, very representative of life itself and that mystery and surprise.
Right.
So,
the challenge is and the challenge for me always with my work over the last 40 years is like translating this digital aspect or into something concrete and tangible like painting. So these are an offshoot of this process, and I'm using panels and paper. I color paper and make these. This one is a large one. It's 6 feet high by 120 inches long. Yeah. So these are some of the newer. This is 40 by 60. So you can see it's a collage in a way.
Absolutely. Are you working with other softwares and layering, or is it or is
Well, when I capture one of these images, they get into I bring it into Illustrator, and then I also have devised a program that actually also uses processing to mosaicize this in a way. So yeah.
so when you start a piece, are you already thinking about the fact that it's going to be 6 feet high by 12 feet wide, or
Oh yeah, I have to plan out the size for sure.
Exactly. I think that's one thing that also in the discussions lately about, everything from digital art to NFTs is the resolution thing that people don't get. I mean, when
Absolutely.
you send someone a postcard of your, say you do an oil painting and they get a postcard in the mail, that's not the same as seeing the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, and
Yeah.
that's where I don't think people understand. And we were talking earlier, both of us, about how we're looking for curators to bring education and challenge and really look into the larger aspects of what digital media means,
And what digitizing an image, what are the philosophical and whatever ramifications of that? That's how I got started on this, because let me go to what I was doing in the 80s when I was leaving California. I was doing this kind of work. It was procedural and with patterning, but it wasn't decorative patterning. It was like perceptual patterning. And it was on rice paper with oil pastel and pencil.
I'm a little bit of a dummy. We work differently, even though we share a lot of I think the deeper messages in some ways. If you don't mind, when something's procedural and versus decorative, is it that one step leads to the other?
Yes. Yes.
I
These
figure
were
so, but
iterations. These are, and these are old, scanned from slides, but these were panels put together, they're paper. And it was almost mathematical the way they iterated from one to the next. Let's see.
I mean, it's funny, paint by numbers. That's what we're all doing a little bit. Underlying it is math, which is
right.
Fabulous. Yeah.
I ended up having a show in Japan, which I wasn't able to get to, but that was what it looked like.
Where was that? Where was that show?
Pardon?
Where in Japan?
Tokyo.
Oh, interesting. Because okay. I've shown in Japan too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, you and I have so many overlaying things.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Was it in Tokyo as well?
My first show was in I think I can't, Sakagura, or no, where it wasn't Tokyo, and I'm forgetting exactly where it was, but I did recently go to Tokyo and talk about my work with
Oh,
the
cool.
11, a 9/11 and 3/11 show. But they seem very into the pop and America and digital scene, more than
Well, that's the funny thing is, like, I was around the digital stuff in San Francisco, but it was just starting, really. It was, 1979 before I moved to New York. And the thing is, once I got to New York and people were talking about representation and photography, and I'm like, but what about the digital? Doesn't that mean something too? And no, it apparently doesn't.
Yeah. There's a lot that I think needs to be learned, explained, and shared. So it's great to have Techspressionism. It's a wonderful salon for sharing larger concepts of digital.
Yeah.
So this is your procedural earlier. This is in San Francisco still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I went through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, continually morphing what I've been doing. I also got into the idea of fractals, that incredible book about chaos that was written. And that's all about boundaries dissolving in science.
Yeah. Mandelbrot and
And what's happened, I mean, I wrote something about it. I never published it, I should have, but what's happened now with the pandemic is exactly what they were talking about. Boundaries dissolving, people moving from place to place, germs going from place to place, you know, that kind of thing, which I find interesting. There are no real boundaries. So when you get into the science of it, I guess.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking back to the installation you just showed us, even while I'm looking at this, that's going, looks like it's going linear, but the circle patterns of, like when you're talking about the replications of things and fractals and that keep coming round and going round into different arenas is beyond borders, you know, even though it's circular. That's a fascinating kind of concept.
Yeah.
And this
So
is called magnetic bubble memory, oil pastel on Japan paper. I think it's interesting for us to let our viewers know what, you know, what medium at least you're going out.
Yeah. Oil pastel, yeah, on Japan paper. Yeah, I mean, I've been told that you don't say rice paper, you say Japan paper, but I got the art supply stores in San Francisco had great panels of Japan paper, so I was really happy.
It's great.
What should I show next? Do you want to see?
Well, you know what, one thing that I love that you said, yeah, I'd love to see a little bit more, but and I'm sure our audience would too, and viewers, but I love what you said, that yes, I always plan what I'm going out to. And I don't know, maybe you want to show us some of your other work while I'm just expressing this thought, but you know, it's that, yeah, like look at these different physical spaces you're going out to. And one thing I don't think people are getting these days is that when we plan a piece, you know, inside we're thinking it's exactly opposite than taking a painting and making a digital print of it. We're making something digitally and deciding, you know, the sky's the limit as long as the language transfer is there. We can go out to tile, paper, sculpture.
Right.
I mean, there is a marketability here, and I think you're very much tapping into that. And yeah, maybe you're laughing, like really not enough.
But it's so true, because my concern has always been this translation from a digital file into something tangible, and that's not easy. I mean, it hasn't been for me, at least. I mean, I've done many different bodies of work, translating it in different ways, and you know,
your work is this animation was beautiful. If you can tell us a little about this that you're showing right now.
I made these animations in 2009, and I found out about this place called the LED Lab, which is in my neighborhood. They've gone, they're not there anymore, but they have all these beautiful, this is a wall right now of different resolutions, and the image is just repeating itself going down their wall. But they let me put, and then this is a curved wall they have. They just let me put the files in their controller and show all these different, the same file in all these different formations, and they're incredible as LEDs. And I would love to be able to afford creating a large, or not even a large one, a small one. You know, they're just.
So this is a curved LED screen?
Mm-hmm. That one is. Let me fast
That's a big one too.
Yeah. So I've been talking to people, like trying to find a place where I could get them fabricated. Let me go forwards. There, like I would like to do these spheres or the cubes. The spheres, I got one quote from a guy who said it would be $100,000 to make. You know, I'm like, oh.
Well, how did you make this one? Because it was the LED Lab?
No, they made them. I put my file in their controller and it displays my animation. It breaks it up into a different form, and I'm really fascinated, and I love these.
So could you work with them again, or maybe I'm missing something?
They basically disappeared. So
that's sad when things are really on the innovative track, and you know, then they go and people don't realize how close we were to getting to some new place.
Well, I think it's possible, and they can be fabricated, and I think a lot of people go to China to get stuff, but I don't think there's a huge commercial market for these spheres or the cubes. And basically it's the commercial market that drives LEDs right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, right.
So,
No, I remember one of my first shows of light boxes in Soho, and everybody thought it was oh, that looks like all the commercial pieces in the airport. And I went, well, the reason I'm using this is because I work in a backlit screen, and it's got light and it's beautiful. And you know, we have to take objects that were used for a certain purpose and help people see them in a new light. But I do love how you're busting through the square here. You know, the rectangle, this round, beautiful, it's a beautiful thing to see an LED projected like this. I mean, your piece
I
on
don't
a,
know what this is doing blinking. I'll stop it. Yeah. I have other ones. Anyway,
sure, let's
this
see
was
'em.
at the Media Lab, some media center in Dumbo. The problem with this one is that there's color in the animation and it doesn't come across when you in that format for some reason. These are screens, not LEDs, so that's a different.
Right, you're projecting because it's animated, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. Wow, I love the abstractness of it and the mystery of it.
Yeah.
It sounds like Fly Jet Blue. This is different.
Exactly. And I live near the World Trade Center and the new one and everything, and the Oculus. And they have these they have hallways full of screens. I'm like, oh, can't I put my thing on it? What are those screens?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I hope you will be able to. That would be great.
Yeah, me too.
Are you comfortable for a minute? Because I know we both worked in, I guess you would say, corporate commercial spheres as
Yes.
well as fine art. And I think young people are very interested in that. You know, when people say, oh, have you made a living as an artist? And I go, yes. I mean, for me, at least, I thought working inside corporate, I mean, I was always railing and wanting to get home and do my digital, but it was always
Right.
a symbiotic relationship of being paid and paid well, and using technology and learning new technology. And so if you could, you know, the Renaissance never separated those two concepts, commercial and
Right.
fine, so much. And I think it's at the disadvantage to artists, and I think we're coming out of that. But I wonder if you will speak to that, your perspective.
Sure.
For a minute.
Well, my working career has been waitressing, word processing, and web design. All in
I
the
love
and teaching after that. But what happened, I came to New York, I started waitressing and realized that wasn't a good future. I mean, I'd already been doing that, but it comes to a point where you're like, what am I really going to do here?
Yeah.
And I learned word processing before a lot of people. So I made really good money doing that on Wall Street at law firms, but that also got tedious and not exactly fun. And I got a grant from NIFA and decided in 1988, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to school. A friend of mine had been doing slide stuff and said, we need people that know Photoshop. So do you remember Burt Monroe?
Of course, yes, I know. Yeah, I visited him in San Francisco.
At SVA, and then
Yeah.
I learned Illustrator. And
Was he teaching at SVA? I forgot that. Was he teaching at SVA?
Well, he was there when I taught. I mean, when I took a class, and that was only a month. I don't remember.
For people who may not know, I'm just remembering that we'll have a larger audience listening. School of Visual Arts in New York City, and they were one of the really early players.
Absolutely.
Bruce Wands had some wonderful exhibitions going and was teaching, and it was I took the earliest courses there.
Me too.
In '84.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, I was thrilled to death. 4 colors on an IBM. I mean, oh my God. It was
Yeah.
So when were you there? And
I was there in '88. Now, those fractal things I was doing was before that. So I was using some sort of paint program. I cannot remember it to save my life. So I was already using the computer to generate forms, and I was painting on wood, projecting, tracing the forms and painting on wood and making these totems, because I kept having that anthropology in my head, I'm like, there's some sort of
Yes.
correspondence here with the past and the present. And anyway, so I was making totems, digital type of a painting and a totem. Anyway, and I got that grant and went to SVA, and then I started working at Dow Jones for a CD-ROM design. And I also worked at a place called Edgeworks. I don't know if you remember that place, but
Sounds familiar.
the guy who was a partner had developed After Effects. He invented it.
Oh, wow.
And they were digitizing film. That was their whole thing. And that was in 93 or 4. Well, 94 is when I started doing web design. I got a call from someone, and then I was off to the races doing web design.
Did you enjoy that as a, more
It
than?
was so much fun.
Yeah,
But I
see,
have
that's
to
not like word processing. That's where you can really use your creative and multi level talents,
You're not kidding. I was the only woman at the place, and I was also older than most people there. But it was just a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And, I stopped in 2014 because I couldn't do that, plus the commissions, Mosaic commission and teaching at the same time. It was too much.
That's a great problem to have. That's a successful story, I'd say.
And that also, everything had changed by then, and it was really about coding more than design, I think. So.
And being part of what I would say the early .com, which, we in Techspressionism, we have a lot of young compatriots there, younger, where we're kind of, I think it's nice to tie the dots because, we talk about everything from going, I hope even more, going back to the past and the Renaissance and, the first lithographs were done, or the first etchings by Rembrandt, and they weren't even numbered. I mean, in the early days of technology, people are out there exploring together, and it's an exciting
Right.
time. And the
Right.
90s were like that, I feel. And I feel
Yes.
we're at a certain different, we took a decade to kind of get going again, and it's on a certainly different level. The whole world has gotten digital, for better or worse. But I think it's an interesting tie in history for us to be telling our stories and connecting it to what's going on today and
Yeah.
seeing where we move forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm not so interested in the AR and VR aspect of things, even though I would like to do AR, like have someone be in front of a painting and then click on something and have the painting kind of animate. with my
Yeah,
hand.
that's sort of what I was doing with the Diamondscapes. I mean, for me, animation are all about going inside a still image in that Z space. Deep, 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 deep in the Z, not really going across the screen, which is again about pixels, which even in your work, I mean, the 2D aspect, there's so much that can happen in that flat spiritual plane. It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
activity. Can you tell us what you're working on now? We're probably going to wrap up in a few minutes here, unless you want to show us something before that.
Well, I'm just really working on these paintings. Move forward. I'm just doing a lot of these in my studio. I'm kind of working with somebody, an institution, on some stuff as a commission, but I'm really just, working as a painter in a way.
I love that. Someone once told me, one of my teachers said, sometime when you get focused, you're doing a series or you have a commission or some big project. And then sometime when you're in that space where the mind is just kind of sitting, like, de Kooning used to say he did his best paintings while he was just, taking a nap in the studio just because of his mind and what he was thinking about. But sometimes when you just splash something down and you're not really going anywhere in particular, then something new, some kernel or something takes place, and who knows, even 10 years later, you might more fully develop it. But I think it's a real creative, you have to have rocking chair time as an artist. You can't totally be producing every second.
Right.
And further to that, I just wanted to ask you to share what interests you about a Techspressionism within what we're talking about right now.
What interests me are the different people that are involved in different ages, different backgrounds, and this incredibly interesting community of people that we've formed. I mean, I wasn't thinking I'd get involved in it. I'm, here in my studio, blah, blah, blah. But it's really compelling to feel like you have a community. It's good to have a community. And
I agree. Do you mind if we stop sharing? Maybe we go back to before we
oh,
stop
yes.
the full screen.
Oh, yeah, stop sharing.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's good to have a community of people to talk to that you get it to a different level of conversation with.
I agree. Yeah, it has been an exciting place, and I'm glad you're part of it.
Thank you. I am too. Thanks.
Yeah, we have some openings coming up soon. We'll put in the pitch. It's
Yeah,
there's one tomorrow night, NFT Now.
right.
We've had our first collaboration show, Techspressionism, and you can go to techspressionism.com and hear about all of these things. Have you thought about doing a collaboration with anyone, or you just?
Well, I haven't had time to look at the video that you all made, which I think is important. I'm glad that people are doing that, because then I get a better sense of what I could do, or
Yeah,
might inspire me to do that. Yeah.
there's plenty to do. I understand we can't do it all. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Right? We only touched the surface, I feel, in a way.
We're going to go out for coffee.
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. And did you know any chance, Kenneth Snelson?
I met him once. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered if his work, because he actually did work with the tensegrity and the atom, and it was, he's a sculptor, so it's a little different. But I just wondered if your paths ever crossed.
Well, I worked for an art lawyer at one point, Jerry Ordover, and he was a client. So yeah, I met him that way.
Yeah, nice guy. Well, there's just so many points and references.
Yeah.
But before we stop, and thank you so much, do you have anything you want to say about how you see the future of art, and maybe thoughts about digital? We've talked about how we keep waiting for, like, the critics and curators to see this as the revolution it is. Or
I would just, like I was saying, I would recommend this book by Madeline Hoy called, I think that's her name, From Point to Pixel. And it really is an in-depth understanding of a much more complex understanding of what's going on with a digital transformation. It's not just social media and the internet. It's digitizing a lot of things in our lives. And I'm not sure where things are going in the art world, because I do see people reacting against technology and creating kind of primitive work and going towards clay and fabric and wood and things like that, craft. And I think that's a reaction rather than, like, really speaking to what does this all mean, the digital? What does that mean to the art and art history? That's my question.
I hear you, because the deeper exploration, if we're not too fearful, is one of extreme excitement.
Yeah, and I just think it has significance in a way that needs to be explored and talked about and written about and curated about.
Well, I'm hopeful we have more of that on a deeper level. And
exactly.
Thank you, Carter, so much. It's been great to speak with you. We're signing off right now. I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you again.
Okay.